The show starts in Berlin, Germany. John Fontanelli, a bike messenger, delivers parcels and couriers to make ends meet. One day at work, he gets an order to deliver a package to an unknown location. But John refuses, citing that it's his off hours, and heads home. Later, an old man, introducing himself as an heir tracker, arrives at his doorstep. He claims that John might be the potential heir to a large estate. The old man gives him 2,000 euros in exchange for his saliva for a DNA check, and asks him not to work while his inheritance claim is settled. Initially, John thinks the old man is just a nut job, since he's an orphan with no family or relatives to inherit anything from. However, he decides to play along, as the old man is paying him handsomely for his trouble. That evening, John heads to a friend's club and spends all the money. At midnight, his friends wish him a very happy 25th birthday. John parties along with his friends and drinks all night. His brother Lino visits him at the club and gifts him his first tie. The scene shifts to the following morning. John and his friends are wasted after the party. In a state of hangover, he picks up a call from the same old man, who insists he pack things up quickly. Our hero is confused, but he decides to go along. Moments later, the old man arrives at the doorstep and urges John to come along with him. Marvin, John's best friend, is concerned about the old man. He jokingly tells John that he might be kidnapped or murdered. However, John brushes him off and says that he could give it a chance because he has nothing to lose. Soon after, he's whisked away on a private flight to Florence and escorted by heavy security. In Florence, he's greeted by Signore Vacchi and his granddaughter, Franca Vacchi, the caretakers of the largest mansion in the city. Signore Vacchi's family has been working in Florence as lawyers and asset managers for generations. John insists that there's been a misunderstanding and that they have the wrong person. However, Signore Vacchi explains that John is a descendant of Giacomo Fontanelli, a powerful man who lived 500 years ago. Fontanelli has left a will stating that his entire fortune would go to his youngest male descendant. This revelation makes John the heir to the world's richest inheritance. However, this wealth comes with certain rules and tasks that John must use for the good of society. Signore Vacchi reveals that Fontanelli had a prophecy about 500 years into the future, envisioning a world deprived of hope. In his dreams, he also encountered a god who advised him to leave all his wealth to his youngest male descendant on the 500th anniversary of his dream, which just turns out to be on John's 25th birthday. This male heir would be responsible for restoring hope to the people. John also learns that there are two in line after him, Kenji Takahashi and Luke Fontanelli. He eventually accepts his inheritance after coming to terms with the fact that he is now the richest man in the world. Franca Vacchi instructs him to wait in the mansion until the will is read. The following day, John is escorted to an office where he's granted citizenship of Italy. Later, Franca's uncle, Gregorio Vacchi, visits John when he is preparing dinner in his private kitchen. Gregorio talks about his family's business and their influence around the world. However, he is completely different from the rest of his family members because he believes money is the utmost need that can solve everything. The following morning, he takes John to the hillside for a little excursion. During this time, Michela, a woman working in security, approaches John in private and tells him that the Vacchis are not revealing everything to John. She reveals an accident that took place in the same spot which the Vacchis tried to cover up. She insists John meet her for the next day at the same spot. They soon return to the mansion while John remains speechless because of what he just heard. Curious, our hero sneaks out early in the morning on a bicycle and reaches the spot. He climbs down the cliff with the help of a rope and discovers a crashed car. He finds an ID named Lorenzo Fontanelli inside it. Just then, Michela arrives at the scene riding a bike. She claims to be the sister of Lorenzo Fontanelli, the last person supposed to inherit the trillion-dollar fortune. She also reveals that she saved her life by changing her identity, but sadly, she couldn't save her brother. She believes the Vacchis are behind this and that they are trying to gain the wealth of the Fontanellis. John is stunned by the discovery and is determined to find out the truth. Michela then insists he give her the names of the successors after him. John only remembers Kenji Takahashi from Osaka, who is 3 days older than him. Suddenly, Michela attacks him from the back, injecting him with a substance. John soon loses consciousness while Michela talks over the phone with someone confirming that their target is down. She also informs them about Kenji Takahashi. It turns out that Michela has lied about her identity and is actually working for someone who is eliminating all the descendants to gain control of the fortune. John later wakes up in a rundown apartment that is used as a secret base by Michela's people. As he's tied to a chair, a man scans his full face and body. It turns out that they're attempting to create a fake video of John committing suicide by stepping onto train tracks. As the video is uploaded to the social media platform, Michela covers his face with a sack and leaves the room. John cries and pleads with her not to leave. Just then, he hears a commotion nearby and someone uncovers his face. He then sees Michela dead right in front of him. It turns out that John's security has tracked him down using a location tracker and killed most of the enemy's men. Soon after, he is safely escorted back to the mansion. John later expresses his frustration with Signore Vacchi for hiring a woman who worked with the enemy. He also blames him for not telling him about Lorenzo's accident. Signore Vacchi chats with John privately and tells him that the kidnapping demonstrates that those who want him dead have the means and willingness to act. Having had enough, John, on Vacchi's advice, decides to renounce the inheritance in exchange for $10 million. He reasons that $1 trillion is worthless if he isn't alive to spend it. However, on Franca's advice, John later changes his mind. He agrees to accept the inheritance after she explains that he has a responsibility to use the money for the benefit of others. Having experienced life without privilege and moving between foster families, John understands the struggles of not having enough. Franca insists that no one is better suited to handle this responsibility than him. He could save the lives of millions of people living in poverty. John shares the sentiment and decides to accept the inheritance. After the will is read, John becomes the owner of all the Giacomo's wealth, but it's up to him to decide how to use the money. To assist him, he is assigned a group of advisors who can guide him on where and how to spend the fortune. In the meantime, Franca is sent home by her grandfather for advising John to accept the inheritance and violating her oath of neutrality. In reality, it turns out that Signore Vacchi has been trying to influence John since he arrived in Florence. The old man wants someone else to inherit the wealth, believing John would squander it. His first choice is Kenji Takahashi, whom he considers a far better candidate for Giacomo's fortune. Takahashi, an Ivy League graduate, is much more educated and knowledgeable about how the world functions. The scene then shifts to Paris, France. We see Luke receiving a parcel from his mailbox when suddenly a man from inside a black Audi hints him to get inside. Luke is also a descendant of Giacomo Fontanelli and the next in line to inherit the fortune after John and Takahashi. Inside the car, the men give Luke his passport and a ticket to Manila. They inform him that someone named Zia has instructed him to fly off to the Philippines as soon as possible. After hearing Zia's name, Luke agrees to do so and gets out of the car. In the meantime, John arrives back in Berlin and meets with his brother Lino. Lino and his wife are pretty surprised about John's newfound fortune. That night, our hero heads to the club and recklessly overspends by throwing money in front of the clubgoers. However, the next morning, news soon breaks out about him being a bike messenger who just turned into the world's richest man. The news highlights John's unethical behavior and talks negatively about him. Consequently, the Vacchis are forced to attend a press conference back in Florence, where they're questioned about John's ability to take over the Fontanelli enterprises. The media is also curious whether the trillionaire is fit to save the world and fulfill the prophecy his ancestors believed in. The Vacchis remain mum most of the time and insist they do not want to comment on the matter for now. Meanwhile, John decides to return to Florence following his publicity. Elsewhere at the airport, Luke sees the news about John taking over Fontanelli's fortune. He's seemingly furious at the news, as it turns out that Luke was approached by influential men who support his claim to the inheritance. Their goal is to have Luke inherit the wealth so that they can exploit his money for their personal gain. such as rigging elections and other immoral activities. However, due to John's stubbornness, the entire world has learned about his trillion-dollar inheritance, making Luke invaluable to these men. Therefore, they now want him dead. Luke misses his flight and returns to Zia's place to demand an explanation. She had promised to help him obtain the inheritance. However, Zia doesn't answer the door, leaving him more frustrated. Just then, Luke notices the same Audi that picked him up the other day and gets inside it. One of the two men hands him a phone with Zia calling. Luke questions her about how a bike messenger like John will fulfill the prophecy. Zia insists he remain calm and stays low for some time. She then warns him that the men are ordered to kill him by some influential people. She advises him to fly off to Algeria instead of Manila and run away as soon as she cuts the phone. Luke follows her instruction, but he also strangles the two men to death before fleeing. In the meantime, John sits in a meeting with a council of experts where they discuss emerging world issues such as job loss, poverty, and climate change. As the experts debate with one another about the solution for such issues, John is certainly overwhelmed by the fact that he now has to save the world with his wealth. After the meeting, Gregorio decides John needs to cool off, so they head off to the seaside. Excited, John leaves the important papers unattended and scattered all over the floor. In the next scene, Signore Vacchi calls his granddaughter Franca back and insists on sorting things out between them. He reveals that he finally finished reading her dissertation on the power of economic transformation processes. He believes Franca is the only one who can influence John and guide him to the right path. However, when Signore Vacchi later sees John's scattered papers lying on the floor, his doubt about John's abilities reignites. The old man warily picks up the papers and goes to the underground vault to keep them safely. However, Signore's weak health gives in, and he suddenly has a heart attack. While all this is happening, John and Gregorio are busy partying at the seaside. 4 days later, John receives mail from an anonymous sender. Inside the package, he sees Franca's dissertation, which has impressively highlighted how the world should work. In Franca's voiceover, we learn that the Vacchis are a family of lawyers and notaries who had been aiding the elites of Florence in accumulating wealth for generations. The Vacchis have also taken an oath of neutrality, meaning they refrain from intervening in matters unrelated to them. Franca, born into the same family, harbors different ambitions. Instead of facilitating the enrichment of the elite, she aspires to assist those in need. When she learned about Giacomo's inheritance, she saw an opportunity to make a significant difference in the world. Consequently, she developed a dissertation outlining how the inheritance could be utilized for the greater good. That afternoon, John attends Signore Vacchi's funeral and tries to talk to Franca. She learns that her grandfather mailed her dissertation to John just before his passing. John insists she helps him in saving the world with his inheritance. It turns out that Franca had already realized that even if John were to feed the entire world, it wouldn't fundamentally change global issues. The problems were systematic and required a more comprehensive approach. Merely donating vast sums of money to impoverished countries would likely only fill the pockets of corrupt politicians. To truly enact change on a global scale, John needed to exert control over the world economy and the flow of money. It was this realization that inspired her activist hedge fund concept, a strategic and sophisticated plan to gain control of key companies worldwide. However, she had initially abandoned the idea when Signore Vacchi reminded her that John was supposed to develop his own solutions. But when she learned that her grandfather, in his moments, recognized the potential of her plan and sent her dissertation to John before his passing, Franca decides that she needs to implement her strategy. As a result, she agrees to assist John once more. Upon her agreement, John promptly purchases an abandoned power plant and transforms it into his headquarters. Franca then recruits hundreds of employees, including John's friends, providing them all with necessary resources to aid those in need. Among the recruited is Malcolm McCain, renowned as one of the best and most unconventional hedge fund managers globally. To simplify, Franca explains to John that Malcolm is the person you'd approach if you wanted to destabilize the stock market, provided you had the financial means to do so. The scene briefly cuts to Luke arriving at a deserted place in Algeria. Back in headquarters, John and Franca have their first official meeting with the experts. Malcolm chairs the sessions and explains how the financial markets work. With $1 trillion at his disposal, John could acquire almost anything, including a majority stake in corporate giants like Amazon. However, such a move would swiftly deplete his funds. For instance, acquiring a majority stake in Amazon would require $800 billion, leaving John with only $200 billion of his $1 trillion inheritance. Malcolm aims to expand John's image beyond that of the world's wealthiest individual and transform him into a globally recognized brand, one synonymous with trust, respect, and leadership. To achieve this vision, Malcolm reveals that he has numerous skilled professionals across various fields, including technology, marketing, accounting, research, and more. Their initial strategy involves leveraging climate change as a rallying point to attract activists' attention. They capitalize on the resulting upheaval to strategically infiltrate the board of Oppenheim Electric, one of the largest energy companies worldwide. In the following scenes, John attends numerous interviews and conferences, attracting the attention of the masses with his speech on giving back to society. With just a 3.7% stake, John and his team successfully oust half of the board members of Oppenheim Electric. As the world celebrates John's philanthropic endeavors and admires his commitment to giving back, Luke harbors a deep resentment towards him for seemingly usurping his rightful destiny. We learn that Luke spent his life feeling like an aimless orphan and wanderer until he met Zia, who showed him that he was destined for greater things. However, his aspirations were thwarted when John was selected as the heir to the Fontanelli fortune. Driven by bitterness and a sense of injustice, Luke leaves Algeria and travels to Berlin intending to kill John. In the meantime, John and his team are occupied in celebrating their recent achievement. Lino, John's brother who has cared for him since their parents passed away, arrives at the scene and expresses his worries. He's concerned about his daughter and wife's safety after John becomes an influential figure. Lino explains to him that he has been followed by someone for some time now. Additionally, the neighbors want his family to move away because they fear that someone might go missing. Suddenly, Luke, holding a gun, appears in front of them and claims that John is not fit to inherit the Fontanelli's fortune. John's security quickly pulls him away and insists he get inside the car. A crossfire soon erupts between the two sides. Tragically, Lino is shot in the stomach while trying to save his brother. The final scene shows a devastated John holding his brother's lifeless body.